My name's Kip. I'm a filmmaker from San Francisco and I have a confession to make. I'm a recovering hypochondriac. Like so many of us, I have a family history of diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. I was always paranoid that I would also get one of these diseases. I exercise regularly, don't smoke, don't drink soda, get enough sleep, reduce stress, and grew up eating what I thought was a healthy diet. Until
World Health Organization this morning has classified processed meat such as bacon and sausage as carcinogenic, directly involved in causing cancer in humans.
the World Health Organization classifies processed meat as a Group 1 carcinogen, the same group as cigarettes, asbestos, and plutonium, and classifies red meat as a Group 2 carcinogen. Was this like I had essentially been smoking my entire childhood? Government and media almost exclusively blame lack of exercise and sugary foods as a cause of diabetes. But I wanted to talk with an actual expert on the role of diet and diabetes. I went to speak with premier physician, diabetes expert, and researcher, Dr. Neil Barnard. What role does sugar play in causing diabetes?
It drives me crazy. Diabetes is not and never was caused by eating a high carbohydrate diet, and it's not caused by eating sugar. The cause of diabetes is a diet that builds up the amount of fat into the blood. I'm talking about a typical meat-based, animal-based diet.
I had never heard that meat was associated with causing diabetes. We had always been told that sugar or obesity caused it. Renowned weight loss bariatric surgeon Dr. Garth Davis, though, agreed.
Everyone thinks that you get diabetic because of carbs. They did a huge study in that EPIC study, 500,000 people. Carbs consumption was inversely related with diabetes. In other words, the more carbs someone ate, the less diabetes they had. But meat was strongly correlated. And so this focus on sugar has taken all the focus off meat, dairy, eggs, pork, turkey, chicken.
I realized there was so much more about diet and disease that I hadn't ever learned. It felt as if this information had been practically withheld. Processed meat causes cancer. Sugar doesn't cause diabetes. I had doubt about the claims these doctors were making, so I did some searching on my own. Harvard researchers looked at 9 prospective studies finding that just one serving of processed meat per day increased risk of developing diabetes by 51%. The link between eating meat and developing diabetes became undeniable.
It's really quite clear from the standpoint of cancer and the standpoint of cardiovascular disease that animal protein plays an enormous role.
Is chicken better?
It's a question of whether you want to be shot or hung.
I had never really thought about eggs much. I just thought of them as a standard part of a healthy diet. But then I found a study suggesting that eating just 1 egg a day can be as bad as smoking 5 cigarettes per day for life expectancy.
The yolk of a hen's egg is the most concentrated glom of saturated fat and cholesterol. It is made to run a baby chicken for 21 days with no outside energy. It is pure fat and cholesterol.
What about fish?
So fish is a little different. You've got the 4 worries, which is PCBs, mercury, saturated fat, and cholesterol. And the cholesterol is all over the place. You can hit tuna in water, that'll be almost less than a glass of milk, to salmon or tilapia, which is higher than a pork chop.
If you look objectively at fish, what you find is they've become essentially mercury sponges. And that's why in many parts of the country they warn you, don't have more than so many of these fish a week because it's getting too much mercury can kill you.
Fish are eaten by bigger fish who are eaten by bigger fish, and these pesticides and herbicides bioaccumulate in the fish flesh. And these big fish, including the salmon, which people think is the healthiest fish, truth is the amount of pesticides and herbicides in the flesh of these fish are shocking, and they have estrogenic and cancer-promoting properties in them. Farmed fish is by no means healthier. All the antibiotics that these animals have to be fed, similar to chickens and turkeys kept in confinement. These fish get infections. They get fungal infections, they get bacterial infections. You've got to feed them antifungals, antibiotics, and these substances accumulate in the fish flesh as well.
Most of your exposure, 93% of it, comes from eating meat and dairy products because it climbs up in the food chain so effectively. So you can get exposed to living near these incinerators and breathing it, but it'll take you 14 years to breathe in as much dioxin as a cow will ingest by eating the grass in 1 day. And that dioxin will accumulate in its fat, which includes the milk and the meat, and anyone eating meat or dairy products is going to get that dose of dioxin, so it climbs up the food chain every step. Men have no way in their bodies to get rid of dioxins, but women have 2 ways. They're both involving having a baby. One is that dioxin crosses the placenta into the growing infant, and the other is that it comes out from the breast milk. So if you have a meat and dairy consuming mother breastfeeding that infant, then the highest impacts of toxic exposure like mercury and dioxins will go to that infant.
Yeah, milk is a risky food for human consumption. As a pediatrician, I see on a daily basis children suffering from conditions that are linked or associated to dairy consumption, such as eczema, acne, constipation, acid reflux, iron deficiency, anemia. Cow's milk protein is the most allergenic food.
It does not build strong bones. Harvard researchers have looked at a large group of older women. Over an 18-year period, the milk drinkers had 0 protection from fractures. So this old notion that somehow milk is going to build strong bones or protect your bones later in life, it's a myth.
People that drink milk have higher rates of hip fractures, have more cancer, and live shorter lives.
It turns out that countries with the highest dairy consumption also have the highest rates of osteoporosis. So clearly, drinking more milk doesn't protect your bones. Found out that dairy can increase a man's chance of getting prostate cancer by 34%. And for women who've had breast cancer, just 1 serving of whole dairy a day can increase their chance of dying from the disease 49%, and dying from anything 64%.
In the animal agriculture industry, as in the tobacco industry, these companies really have a vested interest in making sure that the public doesn't have information about their effects and what risks are really posed to consuming them.
Have this system where animals are living in their own waste, they're living next to animals that are sick or even dead, and they're stuck in cages with these animals. The bacteria tends to spread, so that the pathogens that are being created in these filthy conditions are breeding resistance to antibiotics, and the public are becoming exposed to those.
We already have people dying from salmonella and other things that you eat. We're having about 3,000 people die every year.
10 million pigs in North Carolina produce the waste equal to 100 million humans. This is the equivalent of the entire U.S. eastern seaboard flushing their toilets into North Carolina. But there is no waste treatment. The pigs' waste falls through slats in the floors of the sheds they are forced to live in. It is then pumped into giant waste pits, which leach into rivers and streams, and is pumped out unfiltered onto fields, further polluting the environment and neighboring health.
But you know, mostly everybody in this neighborhood got asthma or either cancer. My neighbor there died from cancer probably just last year. My nephew down the street, he's got cancer. He's in terminal cancer, stage 4. He's not a smoker, not a drinker. And it's not in his lungs. It's in his lymph nodes. But see, if you live here and saw the way they do, you wouldn't eat no pork. Well, I don't eat bacon because I know where it comes from. When they die, they go into a box and they decompose because they swell, especially from the heat. A truck come and pick them up, take them to the processing plant in Rose Hill, brown them up into feed, and feed it back to the hogs.
Pollution from animal agriculture isn't just an issue in North Carolina, though. Raising animals for food produces more greenhouse gases than the entire transportation sector. It is a leading cause of rainforest destruction, species extinction, ocean dead zones, and freshwater consumption. I had always thought there was no prevention for type 1 diabetes, but then I did research and came across countless studies referencing the link between exposure to dairy at a young age and type 1 diabetes.
I mean, this is a food made for baby cows. Cow milk protein gets into the bloodstream, and the body says, hey, this isn't supposed to be in the bloodstream. It makes antibodies to the cow milk protein, which then attack the pancreas and destroy the pancreas.
How is this possible that ADA wouldn't have this forefront on their website? Why wouldn't they be warning all parents about this, even if there were only a slight chance? Why were they recommending people to actually eat these foods linked to diabetes? It seemed all of the large health organizations were encouraging people to eat the very foods linked to the diseases they're supposed to be fighting against. American Heart Association promoting beef, American Cancer Society promoting processed meat, pink ribbons on dairy products, and bacon-wrapped shrimp on American Diabetes Association. And then it all came together. Every single one of these organizations was taking money from meat and dairy companies that are associated with the causes of these diseases. This would be like the American Lung Association taking money from the tobacco industry.
The meat producers don't have to pay for the heart disease or the environmental destruction or any of the other externalities, as economists call them, that their products cause.
You know, then there's the whole pharmaceutical aspect of it, and the fact that there's a very strong pharmaceutical industry and lobby that has a huge stake in preserving the status quo.
And these chronic diseases, these are the cash cows of the pharmaceutical industry.
You have a $5 billion stent industry. Do they ever want to see that go away? We've got a $35 billion statin drug industry. Do they ever want to see that go away?
I'm talking about the pharmaceutical industry effectively controls what doctors are told.
Most research isn't put into prevention, it's put into the medication that we might use for that particular disease.
In the U.S., treating chronic disease such as heart disease, cancer, and diabetes is a $1.5 trillion industry. That's the GDP equivalent of the 10th richest country in the world. I finally realized how deep the collusion truly is between government and these industries, and how dangerous it could be to expose them. These concerns intensified after meeting the USDA whistleblower who revealed mad cow disease in the U.S. meat supply.
Do you think it's safe to eat meat?
I personally don't think it's safe to eat it because of the fact how the line speeds are increasing, and also our inspectors are not well trained enough. At the present time, the line speed now is going about 220 cows an hour. That gives you about somewhere around 4 cows per minute, so that's 15 seconds per cow.
These dangerous slaughter speeds means that animal waste ends up everywhere. Testing shows 88% of pork chops are contaminated with fecal bacteria, 90% of ground beef, and 95% of chicken breast sampled contain animal waste bacteria. There is nothing clean about eating this way. But it just isn't waste, it's also pus-filled infections.
You can see there's a bump or some kind of abscess underneath the hide. Most of the time when the hide's pulled off, either that will open up the abscess and the pus will come out, or if it's deep-seated, when the inspectors are doing their work or the company employees, they might stick their knife into an abscess and it explodes all over the place.
The very animals we are killing were killing us and the planet. But so many people eat meat and dairy every day of their lives, and we are so concerned about getting enough protein.
If you ate a diet that was calorically adequate, and even things like brown rice and broccoli, and you got enough of it, you'd get enough both quantity and quality of protein. 2,000 calories of brown rice and broccoli is going to be about 80 grams of protein a day, including the essential amino acids that you need in order to maintain optimum health.
I mean, grains are loaded with protein. Beans are loaded with protein. Vegetables are loaded with protein.
You really want to get your protein from plants because plant proteins have a much more beneficial effect on our physiology. And you hear this a lot in bodybuilders. They're like, well, I need, chicken, or I need fish to be, to be strong, to build muscle tissue. That is utter nonsense. The largest, strongest terrestrial animals on the planet are all herbivores. The biggest, strongest animals are all herbivores.
When we bring in people and they're on meaty diets and we transition them to a plant-based diet, we always track what they're eating. Their vitamin intake goes up. Their nutrition overall goes up, dramatically better. And these same people might worry in advance, will I get the nutrition that I need on a plant-based diet? The fact is, you're not getting the nutrition you need on a meat-based diet, and you're going to get dramatically better nutrition on a plant-based diet.
All these diseases I had learned about were from eating a diet our body wasn't designed for. What would happen if we started eating a diet our body actually was designed for?
The data is crystal clear that you can stop and reverse heart disease with plant-based diets, scientifically shown. I've seen it in my own patients.
People who adopt low-fat plant-based diets can actually reverse their heart disease, and that literally means watching the plaque start to go away, something they didn't think could happen.
My experience with patients is, and those studies show, that when people adopt a fully plant-based diet, their cholesterol levels plummet within a few days. And if you do blood tests in a couple of weeks, you'll see dramatic improvements.
Yes, your numbers are going to look great within a week or two. Your cholesterol can come crashing down. In fact, if you're on medications, your doctor may have to pull off your blood pressure medication so your blood pressure don't drop too low because it can work too good. Like that, the side effect is not having to take drugs.
In a groundbreaking study published by Dr. Esselstyn following patients suffering from cardiovascular disease, 99.4% were able to avoid major cardiac events by going plant-based.
Because it's not just heart disease. It's hypertension, it's diabetes, it's strokes, it's heart attacks, it's several of the autoimmune diseases, lupus, asthma, GERD, osteoporosis. I mean, there's a multitude of diseases, even rheumatoid arthritis. It can be so dramatic.
I wanted to follow up with Jane Chapman, who had been suffering from severe osteoarthritis, and I could not believe what I saw after only a few weeks of fasting and changing her diet.
So those are so amazing. See, like this only a few weeks later.
I know. From going from the walker, needing wheelchair assistance at the airport, to strolling down the street, enjoying the fresh air, the sunshine. 2 weeks. It's all it took, 2 weeks to get off all the meds and start to feel the inflammation just kind of drain out of the body, where the movement was much easier. Just a lot of healing occurred very, very rapidly just by doing the right things for your body.
When you're treating diseases with drugs, you know, there's one drug you take for cholesterol, a different class of drugs you take for high blood pressure, different class of drugs you take for diabetes. But with diet, a plant-based diet affects all these diseases, one diet to kind of rule them all.
Conditions like high blood pressure, you don't have to take the drugs the rest of your life and be sick forever. What you can do is live in such a way that it gives the body a chance to heal itself. We took 174 consecutive patients with high blood pressure, and 174 people were able to lower their blood pressure enough to eliminate the need for medication.
You can actually take human cancer cells and put them in a petri dish, and you can drip the blood of those eating vegan, get about 72% suppression in human prostate cancer cell growth in vitro. They wanted to try this again with women and breast cancer. So they said, let's see what a plant-based diet can do. After just 2 weeks, their bodies cleaned up. You drop their blood on the same carpet of cancer cells. You can clear off the whole plate. This is after just 2 weeks eating healthy, which raises the question, you know, what kind of blood do we want in our bodies?
My background is in industrial and systems engineering, and that was my career path for a long time until I got thyroid cancer. And everything changed from there. I decided that I wanted to try alternative methods and treatments rather than have surgery and have my thyroid removed, which meant I'd be on medication forever, and I didn't want that. I just started reading how a plant-based diet can heal the body, and it has worked for so many people. So I immediately just switched to a completely whole food plant-based diet. After a year, the cancer was completely gone, and my thyroid had shrunk to normal size, and I was completely free of that.
This was tough to believe. Couldn't this all just be from eating healthier though, like no sugar? Turns out Dr. Walter Kempner from Duke University back in the 1940s was reversing some of our worst killer diseases with diet alone. And the diet he was using was not only strictly plant-based, but it was made up of white rice, fruit, and table sugar.
And he was reversing diabetes, he was reversing malignant hypertension, reversing heart disease, the diabetic complications, reversing diabetic blindness. So these people basically had death sentences, went to him, and were given basically sugar, you know, this horrible diet, but it was strictly plant-based.
If this information had been around since the 1940s, why don't all doctors know this?
We're not taught about the power of food in medical school. No one is taught that the changes that we make with our diet are probably the single most powerful thing we can do to determine our destiny. It trumps our genetics.
Why isn't your doctor telling this? Odds are your doctor never learned any of this. In fact, there's even a bill introduced just mandating physicians get 7 hours nutrition training every couple of years, just to kind of stay on top of it. And who came out against that? The California Medical Association. Even the family physicians, the surgeons, all the mainstream medical groups came out opposed.
It's 7 hours. That's a lot, even if it's over 1 4-year period.
So they're not just kind of neutral, but they're actually actively opposing nutrition education.
Ironically, when patients come to doctors with questions, they assume that the doctor knows something about nutrition, and so it's kind of a double whammy that doctors haven't been taught much about nutrition.
When people are eating meat, I think of it as a bit like smoking. It's sort of Russian roulette. You may not get diabetes, but your chances of getting diabetes, about 1 in 3. You may not get cancer, but your chances, if you're a man, about 1 in 2. A woman, 1 in 3. Your chances of gaining weight, 2 out of 3. It's not all diet, but most of it is. The best thing that you can do to make sure that you empty all those bullets out of the chamber and you're not taking risks with your health is to get the animal products out of your diet and eat healthy foods.
I came to True North to help me with my asthma and to lose a little weight, and it's amazing. Just in 2 weeks of changing my diet, don't have to take any asthma medication, no antidepressants, no pain medication, no heart medication, nothing, no medications at all. And it's just incredible. It's just been so frustrating to me because I went to so many different doctors for help, and I tried so many different medications to help me with my asthma, and nothing helped. And I was stuck on the couch for the last 10 months, unable to breathe. And now in 2 weeks' time, 14 days, I'm off my medication. And I can breathe, and I feel good, and I can walk. My life has changed, and it only took 2 weeks of a whole plant-based diet. Thanks. Thanks.
As powerful as Amy's story was, I knew for some, eating 100% plant-based would still seem extreme.
I think there's this sense that everything's okay in moderation, right? But we haven't seen that moderation works. There really isn't a study that shows that by eating meat and eggs in moderation, you can actually turn your heart disease around and get better.
But I know people who've given up meat and they felt sick.
Yeah, it's unlikely that anybody's symptoms are caused by a dead, decaying flesh deficiency. The lack of highly processed animal food products in the diet is not going to be associated with the causal factor about why they're sick. There is going to be a reason why they're not feeling well, but that's not going to be one of them.
Valentine's Day, I decided to go vegan and give up all meat, which was never in my thoughts in a million years, but I've heard so much success from people that are vegan. And so I gave up all animal products whatsoever. I've lost 29 pounds. I've been able to cut my meds in half. I've been able to cut my insulin in half. And now I'm going for the moon. I'm going to cut it all out. In the last 6 weeks, we've just had 3 grandchildren. And my ugly face is going to be around to see them graduate from high school and college. I'm going to be here.
The reason I'm so committed to this is, my grandmother had diabetes, and I didn't know what I know now about healing the body. And if I did, I feel like she could have lived at least a few years longer. And so it's in her honor that I do what I do. Because I could save someone else's grandmother, aunt, uncle, father from that, So I'm excited about getting the message out there.
An exploding movement of elite athletes are utilizing vegan diets to heal injuries, speed recovery times, and enhance their performance.
Before I was vegan, I was only bench pressing 315 like 5 times. Then after going vegan, I was doing 400, 425, 465. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I'm vegan and I'm bench pressing 465 pounds. This is ridiculous. And as soon as I went vegan, tendinitis started disappearing. My strength in my right arm started coming back. High blood pressure was going down. You can't be strong and be dying on the inside. That's not strong. That's weak. That's really weak because you look big and strong on the outside. Yeah, big man. No, but your heart's crying for help on the inside. You're dying.
Like so many people, I was looking for excuses not to change my diet. But once I finally did, I felt liberated. Within days, I could feel the blood running through my veins with a new vitality. Within weeks, I felt a transformation throughout my entire body and mind. Not only could I survive on a purely plant-based vegan diet, I could thrive. I felt amazing. I competed in my first marathon in 6 years, training half the amount and beat my personal record by 23 minutes. Less than a month later, I did my first full Ironman. Although I could possibly get away with eating a little bit of meat and dairy without ill effects to my personal health, I could no longer willingly support an industry I knew was causing so much suffering to communities, families, and all life on the planet. A whole new world opened up. I felt whole again, connected to a greater sense of what true health is, and where true health doesn't end with me, but begins with us.
You can say, I'm not going to eat that stuff anymore. It's one thing that I can do myself personally to make a difference.
And so the choices that we make every single day, day in and day out, around our food has the capacity to bring us true health and optimal wellness, not just individually, but collectively, as a species and for our planet.
We're not going to live forever, but while we are alive, we can live well. And for me as a doctor, that's what I want to see.
Where there's a will, there is a way. And I believe that.